I'd like to welcome you all back from Ben Azmanim, both those of you who are here in the Sterling Place Shul in Lakewood, as well as those of you who are listening at home, either in your car or watching at home via the fabulous website, Torah Anytime. So, together with those who are here and the thousands at home, I want to welcome you to the Vaad. Now, I've mentioned before that our very capable and efficient coordinator, Reb Gross, forwards to me all of the emails that are received on our comment and question line, which is chinuchvad123@gmail.com. And I do read all of them that he sends me. I cannot respond to any personal questions, I've mentioned that before, but I do read all the comments and the questions, and occasionally I do share with you some of the emails that we received. Tonight is one of those nights. So I have a letter that was sent to the Vaad. I'm going to read for you now. Hi. For a while we were having a very hard time with bedtime for our oldest two children. There was a lot of frustration and anger while we struggled to get them to settle down to go to sleep. I even hit the younger one on several occasions out of anger, something that I do not believe in. After watching the video of Dr. Meir Wikler's advice for bedtime, we implemented a routine where they brush their teeth, I read them a book, then they each take a book into their own bed, and they tell me when they finish reading, they'll go right to sleep so they can get a treat in the morning. Since we started this routine, bedtime has become so much more pleasant, and that has enhanced our whole relationship. I no longer sit at their bedside until they fall asleep, and I'm much calmer throughout the whole process. Even on nights when the neighbors are playing outside, and it's a struggle to get them to come inside, once we begin our routine, they automatically get into it and calmly get ready for bed. Thank you so much for helping us with this. You have truly enhanced our chinuch and our lives. Now for tonight's Vaad. Nothing to do with the letter, has to do with another topic that I think is equally important. When I was in high school, they decided to organize a band, and I thought, terrific, that sounded like a great idea, and I really was excited about it and wanted to join. There was only one problem. In order to join the band, you had to play an instrument, which I didn't do. Now, I had piano lessons when I was younger, but I never really picked it up very well. I knew how to read music, but I was never very good at the piano. And I wanted to join the band. So I didn't play an instrument, but I figured I could learn. And I asked my parents, Lam Shalom, if they would get me an instrument and arrange for me to have lessons. So my parents, to their credit, wanted to encourage me, but at the same time, they were a little hesitant about spending all that money for a brand new instrument that they didn't know I was really going to pick up or apply myself to. So we negotiated a compromise, which is always a good thing, by the way, with children, to negotiate a compromise. And the compromise that we negotiated was that my parents would pay for lessons, but as far as the instrument goes, they weren't going to buy me a new instrument. If I agreed to use the trombone that my uncle had picked up somewhere, my Uncle Zorach, had picked up somewhere along the way in his life, and they knew he had it, it was sitting in his home, and I said, fine, I'll take trombone lessons, which I did, and quite honestly, I didn't really pick up the trombone that well either, but it has helped me in learning how to eventually blow the shofar, which I do, but I wasn't that good at the trombone. Anyway, the next year, I had the lessons, I joined the band, and it was a lot of fun. And then they announced that they were going to have a concert, and all the parents in the school were going to be invited. Now, of course, only the parents of the band really showed up, but it still looked very intimidating when we came into the auditorium and saw the parents there, and it was one of the first times I was going to be on a stage. So I was very intimidated by the whole experience. And I remember that as the band was getting ready behind the curtain, before they lifted the curtain and we were going to perform what we had rehearsed, the band leader was going around to some of the members of the band and kind of giving them a last minute sort of words of encouragement, a chizuk, whatever it was. And I noticed how he kind of leaned over and whispered something to the trumpet player. And then he went over to the drummer and said something to him. And he was going over to all of the different musicians in our band and giving them some kind of last minute instructions. And I saw he was slowly making his way towards me, and I realized he was saying something to everybody. So he's probably going to say something to me too. And I was kind of getting ready and excited to hear what kind of words of encouragement. Maybe it'll make me feel less anxious or give me a little boost just before we're going to perform. And I still remember to this day, when he came over to me, he leaned in and so no one else could hear, and I was very attentive what the words his band leader was going to tell me. And he said to me, Wikler, if you're not too sure of some of the passages in this piece, try not to play too loud. Well, I was crushed. What? He doesn't have confidence in me. He thinks I can't do this. What is he thinking? And I was so demoralized by that comment. I was determined to show him how well I could play. So I said, for this piece, I'm going to throw myself into it like never before. And I did. And I was so enthusiastic about playing that piece that I finished just a little bit before everybody else. Now, for those of you who are not musicians, what that means is, if the musical piece ended da-dum-bum-bum, so then I played da-dum-bum-bum just before everybody else played da-dum-bum-bum. And I'm sure it was noticeable in the audience, and I felt a little embarrassed about it when I finished and everyone else was still playing for a second after that. And now I didn't really keep up with the band leader. He didn't come back the following year. I'm not sure why. I don't know if my performance had anything to do with it, but he didn't come back to the school after that. Now, the point I'm trying to bring out with that little anecdote, Rabbosai, is that I think the band leader, in all fairness, was focused a little too much on the outcome, on the performance, on making sure that everything came across well. But he wasn't paying enough attention to his input into me. And sometimes, as parents and mechanchim, we may be too focused on the outcome and not focused enough on the input. And while we may be trying to have a wonderful concert or a wonderful product or a wonderful outcome, we may be losing sight of the impact of our input. And I want to give two other examples. One parenting and one in chinuch, to illustrate that point a little further. The first comes from a clinical case, not of mine, but of a dear friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Ben Sorotskin, who was treating a young man for depression. And just to give you an idea of how depressed this young man was, except for once a week when he went for his appointment with Dr. Sorotskin, his therapy appointment, this young man spent the rest of his week holed up in his room. He didn't go to yeshiva, he didn't go to school, he didn't go to work, he didn't go out, he didn't get together with friends. He just stayed in his room. Now, he did come out for meals, but that's about it. And some of the meals he wouldn't even eat with the family, just take his food back into the bedroom. And he remained in his bedroom for a year and a half. After a year and a half of therapy, the therapy had been successful enough that he was ready to sort of venture out a little bit, so to speak. And he came out of his room and he announced to his parents, I think I'd like to eventually enter a career of being a therapist myself. And he told his parents that's his goal. He thinks he wants to become a therapist. And the first thing his father said to him was, you want to be a therapist? You know, you're going to have to earn your high school diploma first. You didn't even graduate high school. You're going to have to get a high school diploma first before you can start thinking about being a therapist. Well, this comment effectively squashed whatever little motivation that young man had developed over a year and a half, and that sent him back in his room for another 6 months. Now, in all fairness to the father, he was right. You can't become a therapist and go to graduate school if you don't have a high school diploma. You need a high school diploma, you need a college degree, and then you have to go on to graduate school before you can become a therapist. So the father was absolutely right. But mentioning that as the first comment, after your son finally expresses some interest or some motivation of doing something other than staying in his room all day, that's going to discourage him rather than encourage him. Certainly, advice about furthering his education is important, and there's a time and place for everything. But maybe the first comment should have been, that sounds like a great goal, and that's a wonderful aspiration, and I think it's a terrific career to go into, and good for you for choosing it, and give a little encouragement that way. The second example is not a case of mine or anyone else's, but it's a story a very tragic story that I heard at a convention, and it wasn't from the speaker. I don't maybe remember what organization had the convention. It was a weekend, a Shabbos convention somewhere. It must have been about 25 or 30 years ago. And at this convention, the Shabbos Sudas Friday night, Shabbos that day, there was assigned seating wherever we sat. But Shabbos Sudas was open seating. You could sit wherever you wanted. And I sat down in front of the speakers. I wanted to hear the speakers, Shabbos Sudas. And a man just sat down next to me, and he looked at me and said, "Are you Dr. Wikler?" I said, "Yes, I am. Guilty as charged." That's I am. "You speak publicly sometimes?" I said, "Well, wherever I'm invited, I'll be glad to speak." He said, "But you still want to speak to Rabbanim?" I said, "Well, if they would invite me, I'll speak to them too." He said, "Why are you asking?" He said, "Well, I'd like to tell you my story, because if you do speak publicly, you might want to include it at some point, and it may be helpful to some people to hear my story. I want to share it with you, if you don't mind." I said, "Well, until the speakers begin, I'm all yours. I'm all ears. Tell me what you want to share with me." He told me that he grew up out of town in a frum home, and he went to a day school, to elementary school. And yet, when he was, I think, in 7th or 8th grade, his parents felt that they wanted him to have a higher level chinuch than he could get out of town. And they wanted to send him to New York, to yeshiva in New York. And he was maskim. He wanted to grow in his learning and become mainstream, so to speak. So they sent him to a yeshiva that happened to teach in Yiddish. And this young man didn't know a word of Yiddish. But he was willing to learn, and he wanted to catch up. And he was in the shiur, I don't know, 7th grade or 8th grade, and he didn't understand a single word that the Rebbe was saying because it was all in Yiddish. And he hadn't had much Gemara out of town in the day school, so he wasn't that familiar with the Aramaic and the Gemara. But the Hebrew he knew, and between the Hebrew that he knew, he somehow could get the gist of what was going on. And for 2 weeks, he sat in shiur trying to grasp whatever he could, and hoping that eventually he'll catch on and pick up the language and get into it. Now this particular Rebbe that he had the practice of, when he gave shiur, he would teach for 45, 50 minutes, and then he would allow 10 minutes for the boys to chazal what they had learned, and then he would continue. And during that 10 minutes, he let anyone come up to him to ask a question that they had. So after about 2 weeks, this young man was trying to follow the shiur, trying to follow the Gemara, and not getting very far, but getting the gist a little bit, the topic, something he was able to follow. And he was a little bit on the shy side, but he wanted to learn and he wanted to grow. And there was a particular line in the Gemara that he had no sense at all what this was, what it meant. And he thought during the question period, when people are free to go over to the Rebbe to ask him whatever they want, he'll ask the Rebbe to just translate for him what these words mean, and that's going to maybe be the key to that whole sugi. He'll be able to understand what's going on. So he built up the courage, and he walked up to the Rebbe's desk, and he showed him the words he didn't understand, and he asked if the Rebbe could just tell him what the meaning of those words were. Yes, quietly. And the response of the Rebbe was unbelievable. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't hear it from myself. The Rebbe slapped on the table, called everyone's attention, said he wanted to everyone here. The question that was just asked by the Tipesh She'ein Kamohu. Now, this young fellow didn't even know what that meant. But he had a sense that it wasn't very nice, that it wasn't something positive, because he saw the reaction of everyone kind of grimacing and squirming in their seats when the Rebbe said it. He went back to his seat and waited till later in the day. He went over to one of the other boys, and he finally got those words translated. And he understood what Tipesh She'ein Kamohu means. He told me that whole year was completely a blank. He was in a fog for the entire year. The following year, he came out of his fog, but he wasn't able to learn. He was at least able to get through school, and he finished high school and went on and got a job, was working. And to his credit, he didn't go off the derech. That wasn't a popular thing in those days, to go off the derech. And he remained frum, and he was married a frum girl, and his kids are going to yeshiva. But Ad Hayom, when he told me this story about 25, 30 years ago, had not been able to learn, has a total block against any learning Torah, and is just not able to get past that. And he shared it with me because he thought perhaps if I'm speaking publicly sometimes, I could share it as well. And it could be a little bit of a wake-up call to mechanchim that that's not necessarily the best way to be mechanech children. Now, in all fairness to the Rebbe, why would the Rebbe think that that's the way to motivate a child? That that's the way to get a Talmud to learn better by treating him that way? And in all fairness to the Rebbe, I would suspect that that's probably how he was taught. And that may be even the way he was treated at home. And he may have grown up thinking that if you want to get the best out of someone, you got to give him a knock, give him a patch, put him down, and that'll motivate him to want to try harder. But even if the Rebbe had received that kind of chinuch when he was growing up, or received that kind of parenting from his home, that certainly didn't have a positive impact on this particular Talmud, and it had a devastating impact on him. So what should parents do? What's the right way to motivate, to bring out the best? So we don't have to look any further than David HaMelech and the way he was mechanech his son, Shlomo HaMelech. Now before I get to the comment that David HaMelech made, I want to set the table a little bit. This is the time at the end of David HaMelech's life. Not exactly on his deathbed, but he's not far from it. And he's now given over the melucha to his son, Shlomo. And he's giving him his last instructions. He's talking to the next king of Klal Yisrael, and he's trying to encourage him. And at this point, Chazal tell us, Shlomo HaMelech was only 12 years old. And what does David HaMelech say to his son to encourage him to be all he can be as the Melech of Klal Yisrael? So Melachim Aleph, Perek Beis, Posuk Beis, this is what David HaMelech says to Shlomo. Anochi holech b'derech kol ha'aretz, meaning he's not much longer in this world. V'chzakta, be strong, strengthen yourself. V'yisa le'ish, and be a man. The Rabag on that posuk says as follows. Ritzel, what is David HaMelech trying to say? Shelo tiyena pu'ulasecha pu'ulas tzo'ir shonim b'nar. Don't let your actions be immature, irresponsible, childish actions. After all, he's only 12, but he has to rise up to the occasion. He has to fit the shoes of a melech of Klal Yisrael. Aval tiyena pe'ulos ish gadol. Your actions should be the actions of a mature, responsible, intelligent, rational, adult male. V'zeh amnom yiyeh. He means yashvus etza. And we do this by consulting with other people. What was David HaMelech telling Shlomo? Achzak davisa v'ish. He was saying, I believe in you. I think you can do it. I have faith in you. And I believe it's possible for you to rise to this challenge and be everything that you can be. That's the way to motivate children. That's the way to encourage. Being positive and giving over to the child or the Talmud your conviction that they're capable of doing what they may not be doing now, but you believe that they're capable of doing it. And that's going to encourage them. Not a knock, not a patch, not a put down, not an insult, not a discouragement, but an encouragement. I have one final example of what I think is a good illustration of what I'm talking about. I was zeicha to have a very close kesher with the late Boston Rebbe, Zecher Tzadok B'Kadosh L'Bracha, Reb Levi Yitzchak, who was the Boston Rebbe in Boston and Har Nof in Eretz Yisrael. He was many things to many people. He was very charismatic and definitely a leader in Klal Yisrael. But one thing that was not on his resume was he wasn't a shadchan. Didn't make shidduchim. But one time, he thought of a shidduch, an in-house shidduch, so to speak, between two Boston families in Har Nof. And he called in a particular young lady, a seminary graduate. He called her in and he said he wanted to meet with her and he wanted to suggest a shidduch for her. Oh, very flattered. The Rebbe wanted to speak with her to suggest what shidduch did he have in mind. So he mentioned the son of a very prominent family in Har Nof. And this son was a Shem Dover. He was definitely a Tachshit, a top Talmud, a Masmid, a Yireh Shemayim, Gevaltik Midos from a wonderful family, and good-looking fellow to boot. And he had Alamilas, Mamish Alamilas. He was the sought-after Bacher in Har Nof at least, if not the greater part of Yerushalayim. So the Rebbe mentioned the boy's name to this girl. Now, he was very well known, this Bacher, and the family was well known. And the girl was taken aback when she heard the name. She shook her head and she said, with all due respect, I don't think the Rebbe knows me very well. Yeah, I've heard about Bacher, of course. Who doesn't know if the family is such a prominent family? She said, I'm just a regular Beis Yaakov girl. You know, I want to find Ben Torah as a chassan, and I'm looking to get married, of course, but that's not appropriate shidduch for me. I don't think the Rebbe really knows who I am. So the Rebbe heard what she said, and he leaned across his desk, and in a very stern expression on his face, which was not usual for the Boston Rebbe, who was always very gentle and soft-spoken. But this time he got very stern. And he says, young lady, I'll have you know, I do know you very well, and I do know who you are. But that's not all. I also know who you can become. If you aspire to a shidduch like this, you can grow to be someone who's worthy of such a shidduch. And I think you're capable of it. And you think it over, and you tell me, if you want the shidduch, I'll read it. She thought it over. She said, okay. They met, they went out, they got engaged, and they've been married for about 10, 15 years. They have 6, 7, 8 children, I don't know exactly how many, and very happily married. The story was told to me by the mother of the young lady, shared the story with me, and it's a shining example to me of what we're talking about tonight, of how it's important to bring out in children and Talmidim the best that they can be is by demonstrating to them and convincing them that you have confidence in them, that you feel they're capable. And that's the encouragement that they need, and they can bring out all the best in them and help them to become the best that they can be. So I want to thank you for coming. I hope we'll see you, B'ezras Hashem. Next Vaad will be in 4 weeks, November 11th, and I hope, B'ezras Hashem, we'll see you all then. Thank you very much.